Good morning, friends and enemies. We're going through every wide receiver for fantasy football week 14, game by game by game, and we're bucketing all of them into must start, strong start, dub flex, L flex, or the cone category. As it relates to your fantasy lineups this week, we've got a bunch of teams on bye. We will reiterate that. We did this same video for the running back position yesterday, so go check that out if you've missed that. It is the Broncos, it is the Colts, it is the Patriots, the Commanders, the Ravens, and the Texans. All right. So a lot of firepower, not in your lineup. All right. So hopefully you can surpass this week, get into the fantasy playoffs, have everybody at full strength. Let's jump into Thursday Night Football. We've got Green Bay on the road in Detroit. Detroit favored by 3.5 points, 51.5 point total here. Now, because they're in Detroit, they are in a dome. Vegas is expecting a lot of points, and I don't see a reason why we should not expect that as well. All right. Now, Green Bay's defense has been good. They've been getting it together, and I don't want to say they're scary, but as you could see from the chart down below, I mean, 7th in coverage rank per PFF, 7th in EPA per pass rank, and 6th fewest points allowed to the fantasy wide receiver position right now. So not a fantastic matchup for Detroit through the air, to be honest with you, but I don't think it matters because of the point total here. So Amon-Ra obviously drops into that must-start category. Jameson Williams, I think he's been a little bit more boom or bust, and he's given you exactly like what you think of. He's been one of the very, very few players in the history of fantasy that people are like, oh, he just has like good games and then terrible games. Like he's either going to go crazy for you. He's like the best ball pick. He's literally done that. He either goes like 70 yards and a touchdown, or he's just kind of in between. But he's been a great player for them, stretching the offense overall. Now with Green Bay, the secondary was a little bit banged up. Jair Alexander has been practicing all week, so I expect him to play for the Thursday Night Football game, which does make it a little bit more difficult for an outside boundary receiver like Jameson Williams. If I have him in my lineup, though, 6 teams on bye, I'm going to throw him into the dub flex category, and there's no one else that I'm looking at in the wide receiver position for the Lions. For Green Bay, obviously a tricky situation to really decipher through. Romeo Doubs expected to clear the concussion protocol and play in this one versus Detroit. Now, Detroit has been good on defense, but they are dealing with so many injuries, especially on the defensive line, which will probably have some trouble getting pressure against Jordan Love. And you give Jordan Love some time to throw the ball, he's going to throw the ball, and he's going to throw for a lot of passing yards here. So with Romeo Doubs returning, again, this does make it a little bit tricky here. Jaden Reed, I feel really good about in my flex spot, so I'm going to throw him into the dub flex for now, but he's definitely bordering on that strong start category. He just hasn't seen the targets in quite a while. He just hasn't been the consistent player that he'd been in previous years. He's coming off of a 2-touchdown game, so the fantasy points were there. Detroit does allow a lot of fantasy points to slot wide receivers, which is why I do think Jaden Reed could easily get into the strong start category for this week. But Jaden Reed I feel good about. Doubs has been probably the best possession receiver on this team when healthy. So I'm going to throw Doubs into the dub flex category as well. Christian Watson's going to probably fall. The game environment has like Christian Watson written all over it, but there's really no games that ever have Christian Watson written all over it. So he's going to go into the L flex category. And again, as a reminder, dub flex is like dudes I will flex and I feel really good about. L flex is like dudes you're probably going to have to flex and I would flex, but I don't feel good about. So Watson will fall into the L flex category for me. He's getting the opportunities and he's like made some good plays, but very rarely does a full game really come together for him for fantasy. Dontavian Wicks, yeah, he's gonna finally go into the cone category. Apologies there. And before we move off the Thursday Night Football game, Underdog has a free square for you, Jordan Love. As long as Jordan Love throws for one single passing yard, you're a winner on the platform. Literally, you win your bet if Jordan Love throws for one passing yard, okay? They've got the free square there for you. All you have to do is go and download the Underdog Fantasy app. When you use code BDGE and deposit $10 or more, they're going to hit you with a deposit bonus, however much you deposit. I think it's like up to $1,000 at this point, and you're going to get this free square, all right? It's Jordan Love, 1 yard. You love to see it. No pun intended, but you do love to see it, okay? Let's move on to Las Vegas, Tampa Bay. We've got Tampa Bay, 6.5 point favorites at home versus the Raiders. The Raiders have been one of the worst secondaries in the NFL up to this point. As you can see, their coverage rank per PFF is dead last. EPA per pass rank, 31st in the NFL. Relatively high over-under, 46.5 points because Tampa has been putting up an incredible amount of points. Mike Evans, of course, is a must-start. And behind him, I mean, Shepard had a good game, but like I don't see consistency there. We haven't seen consistency there. Jalen McMillan is playing snaps, but literally doing the opposite of that, which is what we would define a cone as. So McMillan's in the cone category. Shepard's going to be in the L flex category for me. Mike Evans will be a must start. On the flip side of things, you can't start any wide receiver in Vegas outside of Jacoby Myers, who at this point I think has just earned the strong start category because they've, Devontae Adams is out of the picture. DJ Turner, I think he tore his ACL. Not that he really matters for fantasy, but when the targets get more and more and more and more condensed, they're going to keep going to Jacoby and Brock Bowers. So Jacoby's going to be a strong start for me. I feel really good with Jacoby Myers in my lineup because he's like a guaranteed floor of 8 targets pretty much. And Tampa Bay's pass defense is one that could be absolutely had regardless of who the opponent is on the other side of the field. Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh at home, 6.5 point favorites, 44.5 point total here. George Pickens, must-start player. He has just been, he's been a wide receiver 1 since Russ has come out to the field for Pittsburgh. So we are not worried about that. Right now, there's no weather concerns really across the entire league. The only one we'll have to look at is the next matchup, which we'll get into in a couple of minutes, but Jacksonville, Tennessee, but it's not even really that significant. So no weather to really be concerned about as of right now, as I'm filming this Wednesday morning for this slate. But yeah, Pittsburgh, we have George Pickens behind him. Like Jefferson has some games and Calvin Austin has some games, but the lack of consistency is just so glaring that I don't want either of them in my lineup if I'm playing for the fantasy playoffs here. So Pickens top, everybody else cone type category. Cleveland. I mean, what is there to say about motherfucking Cleveland right now? Jerry Jeudy, 200 yards. David Njoku, 17 targets. Elijah Moore getting him back. But I think Cedric Tillman coming back matters. He's been out with a concussion, and if he returns, it's a very condensed target share. All of these guys are getting about 10-plus targets a game, so I don't know that it actually matters. The matchup is difficult, but we also just saw all of them get home against Denver, which is arguably an even more difficult matchup through the air. Jameis is just going to throw the ball 45 times a game. So if Tillman is back, he's a dub flex for me. Jerry Jeudy's been incredible. I do think it does make the target share a little bit more tough to decipher, so he's been really good, but I'm still going to throw him into the dub flex category. Elijah Moore, dub flex. Like I think they're all just dub flexes because how are you going to put a guy that sees 8+ targets in anything but one of the top 3 categories here? Like any of them have such a high floor, and as we've seen, massive ceiling games from Jerry Jeudy, from Cedric Tillman, from David Njoku. Like all of these guys, really outside of Elijah Moore, who's had good games, all of them have ceiling games as well. Whereas like we're not really seeing that with the Green Bay Packers room, where they're like equally as talented, and some of them get home. But we haven't really seen big ceiling games out of Watson. We haven't seen it from Jayden Reed since like the first month of the season. Whereas Cleveland, because of the pure fucking volume, like Green Bay is giving Josh Jacobs 25 touches a game, where the Browns can't really get anything going on the ground. So they just continue to turn to Jameis regardless of what the results or the consequences, I should say, of him throwing the ball 45 times a game is. So it's a relatively low on over-under. It is a tough passing defense, obviously. That being said, I just don't know how you could put any of them lower than a dub flex. And if I had to rank them, because if they're all going to go into the same category together, I guess I'd just go Jeudy as the 1, Tillman as the 2, and Elijah Moore as the 3. Because I guess Jeudy has just kind of earned that right, man. 200+ yards, like you got to be taken a little bit seriously. He's now 4th in the NFL in receiving yards, I believe, which is fucking insane. Let's go Jacksonville and Tennessee. So Tennessee is a 3.5 point favorite at home. This was the only game that had like semi-weather concerns, scattered showers, possible winds, 10 to 15 miles per hour. But, we're a few days out, so things could change pretty easily there. I'm not overly concerned with anything that doesn't have, 20+ mile per hour winds. It is a 39.5 point total here, so they do not expect things to go great here, mainly because Mac Jones is starting in place of Trevor Lawrence, most likely. So on the flip side, yes, Brian Thomas Jr. had a good game with Mac Jones last week. Like a lot of the production that BTJ actually had did come with Mac Jones. That being said, like that does not make me feel predictive about this matchup. That does not make me feel like, okay, great. That means that's what's going to happen week over week. Parker Washington had the good game. I will put BTJ in the dub flex category. I'm going to put Parker Washington in the L flex category. I'm going to be honest. BTJ feels closer to L flex than he does strong start for me. So I'm thinking about if I have him in my lineup, I liked him a couple of weeks ago when Mac Jones was playing, and it was one of those things where I was like, okay, throw him into your lineup. He will produce 12 to 14 PPR points for you, but just don't watch the game. Because they were like 10 point, I think it was against Detroit, they were 10-point underdogs, and that's what happened. When they got down by 25 points, the entire third, fourth quarter were just chucking the ball up, and he ended up getting home because of it. This does not have the same feel or the same script where it's like, Tennessee is not going to get up by 20 points to where Jacksonville is going to want to have Mac Jones throw the ball 40 times. So, like I said, BTJ, I'm going to throw him into the dub flex category because he's been so explosive this year, but he's closer to the L flex than he is the strong start for me. For Tennessee, we got Will Levis, and the only two wide receivers we're thinking about are obviously Calvin Ridley and NWI, the touchdown god. And Jacksonville is the woaded matchup for fantasy wide receivers, or the goated matchup, I should say. Ridley's going to be a strong start for me. The volume's always there, coming off of a bad game, but like he'll get back on track. Will Levis is slinging the goddamn thing. And then you got NWI. I'm going to throw him into the dub flex category again. He was there last week. He will continue to be there. I know the volume is not necessarily there, but the dude just keeps getting home, and he's running every route. He's on the field for every snap. Like, I don't know what else you need to see from him in order to get this guy in your lineup in a 6-team bye week. Next up, we got Carolina, and we have Philly. All right, so we have 12.5-point favorites for the Philadelphia Eagles, 45.5 points here. Now, A.J. Brown, of course, you start him. He's got to go into the must-start category. Devontae Smith, player-wise, talent-wise, he's obviously like a must-start guy, but he's definitely more based on his production and more so based on Philadelphia not passing the ball very much. Like, if there's ever a game where they're not going to have to throw the ball, it is this one. Saquon might get 35 touches in this game. So Smith is going to fall into the dub flex category for me. I think despite the matchup, and he's not guaranteed to play. He's been out the last couple of weeks with a hamstring injury. He is expected to return for this game. Maybe they don't push it based on the schedule they have afterwards and maybe needing Devontae Smith a little bit more for those games. But there is a world where he returns and the volume is not high and it's a great matchup, but it doesn't actually come to fruition. And I think that's a very, very likely scenario here. The one thing they do have working for them is Dallas Goedert is going to be out for probably the remainder of the season. And we've seen in games where Dallas Goedert doesn't play, the targets, again, start to condense and funnel into A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith over and over and over and over again. But I just worry that Jalen Hurts won't throw the ball more than 20 times in this entire game. So on the flip side, we got Carolina. Very tough matchup. Obviously, Philly's as good of a defense as there is in the NFL right now, especially through the air. Shut down cornerbacks in Quignon and Cooper DeJean. Like, just unbelievable turnaround they had in the secondary throughout the offseason and into this year. Bryce Young has obviously looked better, but this is in Philadelphia. This, we look at the last couple of matchups, like they played Tampa Bay last week. That is one of the easiest matchups on paper for a quarterback to succeed in. Kansas City, we're starting to see that they are kind of a fraudulent secondary right now. They're not that good of a pass defense. So Bryce Young's had a lot of easy matchups leading up to this game. Now he's in Philly. Now we have a really good secondary. I'm worried that this team will struggle through the air. So when I look at the Carolina pieces, as much as I love Thielen, and he was easily the top waiver wire pickup at wide receiver last week, and if he was still sitting there, he would be again this week. He will fall into the dub flex category for me because I think he has a good floor, but the ceiling is going to be really hard to come by for all Carolina pass catchers. So when I look behind him, it's like I think Leggett is not someone I want in my lineup. Jalen Coker probably back. Don't want him in my lineup. David Moore, whoever it is, everybody else to me is a cone outside of Adam Thielen being a flex play for you. Atlanta and Minnesota. Minnesota, 5.5-point favorites at home, 46.5-point total. So Jefferson is a must start. Of course, he'll bounce back against Atlanta because everybody does. Jordan Addison, he'll stay into the dub flex category. He's been relatively involved, but he's just been so up and down. Like, he has big games because he's very talented. He's a first-round wide receiver, but to expect consistency would be a bit insane to me at this point. So he's a dub flex for me. I'm not starting anybody else in that wide receiver room for Minnesota. For Atlanta, Drake London's, of course, a must-start. I know everybody's freaking out about Kirk Cousins. He's going to bounce back. Atlanta's going to win this game. Atlanta's going to cover the spread. Atlanta's going to, I won't go as far as saying put a whooping on Minnesota, but let's let the narrative build up. Let's let the fucking public finally pile onto Kirk Cousins. He'll bounce back in this game. The passing game will be fine. Drake London is a must-start, and Darnell Mooney is a dub flex. Let's not forget how good Darnell Mooney was prior to what's happened with Kirk Cousins, all right? He was literally a top 10 fantasy wide receiver for at least half the season, if not 9 or 10 weeks, all right? So Darnell Mooney, he's going back into my lineup this week. New York Jets, Miami Dolphins. Miami at home, 6.5-point favorites, 44.5-point total. This is actually the two toughest fantasy matchups for wide receivers in the NFL. New York Jets, the single fewest fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position. Miami, the second fewest fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position. New York, we've got Rodgers. I don't even know what to say about that man anymore. But he's still out there, and he's still trying to throw the damn ball. Garrett Wilson should have scored a touchdown last week, overthrew him. Devontae Adams did score a touchdown last week. I think that they just continuously kind of fall into the dub flex category. Like, they're still good players. Rodgers still has an arm on him. He can't escape the pocket. Anytime he's under pressure, he's in trouble. But like when he gets a clean pocket and he zones in on those two just over and over again, they get all the targets in this offense. They're not going to have success on the ground because Breece Hall is banged up. I think both of them could be considered dub flex plays. Good weather, obviously, down in Miami. So when we go to the Miami side of things, Tyreek Hill is going to see a major upgrade if we have injuries to the secondary in New York, which we don't have updates right now. But neither DJ Reed nor Sauce Gardner finished the game last week. I don't know how serious the injuries actually were, so it's possible that they both end up playing. But I keep a very close eye on the practice reports because both of those guys, Sauce obviously hasn't played well this year, but DJ Reed was one of the top cornerbacks for a very large majority of this season. He was playing lights out. They've lost a lot of momentum and a lot of motivation, obviously, so they're not playing the same way that they were earlier on in the year, but they're two very talented players individually. Tyreek Hill needs to be into your lineup. He's definitely more of a strong start than a must start, I think, at this point. Last week he did get home, but it was like a tipped touchdown catch that ended up giving him a little bit of a ceiling. Otherwise, that entire offense has just been Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith on underneath targets. So Jalen Waddle, so inconsistent. He's been awful far, far, far more than he's been good for you. So he's actually going to fall into my L-Flex category because I don't feel good about having him in my lineup whatsoever. And yeah, I would start, even in the tough matchup, I would start all the Cleveland wide receivers over Jalen Waddle. New Orleans and the New York Giants. We've got New Orleans 4.5-point faves on the road in New York, 40.5-point total here. New Orleans, the only thing we could really talk about is MVS, I guess. MVS, I think, is kind of a dub flex. It's a great matchup. You now have Taysom Hill out. They already have all their wide receivers out. Like, there's no one to throw the ball to. So MVS is a dub flex for me. I feel okay about having him in my lineup, honestly. Juwan Johnson's obviously a tight end stream that I think is super viable this week. On the flip side, we've only got Malik Neighbors. Drew Lock is going to start again, which doesn't make me feel good whatsoever. But it is a good matchup against New Orleans. Like, they're a terrible defense. Malik Neighbors is going to be, realistically, he's a dub flex at this point. He's not even really a strong start. He's someone that I want in my lineup. I feel good about having him in my flex spot because he's going to get 10 targets a game, but we've seen so little in terms of a ceiling from him since the first month of the season. So he's a dub flex. There's no one else in New York you could start, though. We've got about 4 or 5 more games here. We got Seattle at Arizona, 2.5-point favorites for Arizona. We have Marv getting a little bit of a bounce back game last week. He does get into the end zone. This total's a little bit lower than I had imagined it would have been, mainly because both these defenses are playing better than they were in the beginning of the year. So 44.5-point total. Seattle's secondary and their coverage is good. They have a good blend of cornerbacks back there, and they're starting to come together. Top 12 in both EPA per pass rank and coverage rank, PFF and EPA, wherever the depths of the magicians get those numbers from in the fucking fantasy football community. They're good either way in both of those categories. All right. So for Marv, this is a tough matchup. I'm okay having him in my flex though because he's been someone that has big games there. So he's going to be a dub flex for me. Michael Wilson's going to be an L flex for me. For Seattle, Lockett's a cone at this point. Although he does play relatively well historically against Arizona, even though I don't think he did last time they played, because I remember saying that and then being like, no, I think Lockett's just completely lost it. And mainly because JSN has just exploded onto the scene and become, not the guy, I don't want to say. Production-wise, kind of. Since DK's returned, DK has gotten a lot of targets. Like last week, he saw 9 targets to JSN's 4, but JSN caught all 4 of his for more yards than DK Metcalf had on his more than double the targets. DK is going to get a get-right game, though. And Arizona, while their defense has been stronger, I don't think they're a team that I'm shying away from. So DK and JSN are both going to get into the strong start category for me, with a shade towards the dub flex appeal, I think. Next game up, we got Chicago in San Francisco, 3.5-point favorites. 49ers, 44.5-point total. A lot of red, a lot of orange. Not a great matchup for either side by any means. For Chicago, we have Caleb Williams obviously playing a lot better. We've got the new coach coming in, or, the old coach on the way out at least, and, they're hiring from within. DJ Moore's seen a lot of targets. Keenan Allen seen a lot of targets and playing pretty well. Rome is seeing a good amount of targets, but just not connecting on them. So Rome's going to be an L flex. Like, there are going to be leagues where you might have to start Rome, and I'm okay with that, but, I feel bad about it. So he's an L flex. DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, I still don't feel great about the offense overall. Like, they're playing better. Their matchups have been a lot easier for them to play better. But I still think, we saw the first half of Chicago against Detroit on Thanksgiving, and there's still that, what the fuck is going on here? If they do that for a full game, you're getting zeros out of those players. So for me, Moore and Keenan Allen are still more dub flexes than they are strong starts right now because I don't entirely trust this offense right now. On the flip side, we have San Francisco who, now that they're not playing in Buffalo, now they're not playing in the snow, we feel a little bit better about Brock Purdy and this passing offense. Hopefully his shoulders another week more rested, and they don't have the ground game there. They don't have Jordan Mason. They don't have Christian McCaffrey, so they don't have real targets out of the backfield. So we look at Juwan Jennings. We look at Deebo Samuel. Honestly, even in this matchup against Chicago, I feel pretty good about Juwan Jennings. I'll put him into the dub flex category. I think most people will probably have to push him more towards a strong start. I think if you have him and you're in a league where you're competing, there aren't going to be a lot of spots where you can sit a dude like that who has taken over the number one role in this offense. So Juwan's going to be a dub flex for me. Deebo, I really want to fade the narrative, but he's looked awful. He hasn't done a fucking thing in this offense. I do think, though, listen, no C-Mac and no Brandon Ayuk. Deebo has to start putting together some good games, right? His future is on the line here. So I'm going to throw him into the L-Flex category. Don't feel good about it, but I will flex him if need be. Outside of that, definitely can't start Ricky P. He's straight up Cone Johnson over there. Coney Pearsall. Next game, we got Buffalo, who whooped the shit out of San Fran last week. They are 4.5-point favorites in LA against the Rams. 49.5-point total here. So a lot of moving parts in Buffalo still because we don't know the status of Dalton Kincaid. We don't know the status of Keon Coleman. That being said, I think Khalil Shakir is rightfully just a dub flex straight up. Throwing him in my lineup if I can. Amari Cooper has been so inconsistent. It's very, very hard to see what we're getting out of him. I think if Cooper and Keon Coleman both play, I think they're going to go into the L-Flex category. Again, L-Flex does not mean I won't start them. I'll just feel really hesitant about them. Whereas Shakir, I feel like he's such a solid part of this offense where we don't really know what we're getting from Cooper and or Coleman on a week-to-week basis, and it makes me feel a little bit queasy there. So they're both going to go into the L-Flex category. On the flip side, the Rams, Puka's obviously a must-start. Cooper Kupp, even though he's coming off of a down game, he's a must-start for me. Demarcus Robinson, I think he is someone that is going to hurt from this matchup. This is a very tough match against Buffalo. Third fewest fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position, where that doesn't really matter, in my opinion, against guys like Puka and Cooper Kupp who are used in the slot in weird coverages, are finding soft spots in the zone, and are in motion before the play so often. It almost feels like if the other team is good in the secondary, it doesn't actually affect those guys as much, where it does affect outside boundary receivers like Demarcus Robinson. So Robinson is going to be in the L-Flex category for me. And we got the two primetime games. We got the Chargers in Kansas City for Sunday Night Football. KC, 3.5-point favorites, 42.5-point total. So not a lot of points expected in this one. The biggest predicament here we got is Ladd McConkey's health, the knee. I'm expecting him to be limited at best throughout this week. Whether or not he plays is going to be a massive difference maker for this offense. I don't feel good about starting anyone else in the passing game. I think Quentin Johnson is going to get into the L-Flex category for me. I think you might have to start him in a league or two. With Ladd McConkey, if he plays, he's a very, very strong start. He's going right into the strong start category for me. But it's not looking or feeling great, to be honest with you, about Ladd right now. He is a huge difference maker and a needle mover in that offense. They don't play well when he's not playing. They do play well when he is playing. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But Ladd, obviously, if he's playing, he's right into your lineup. On the flip side, KC got Pacheco back, looking a little bit better. I think they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more because their secondary is not as good as we thought it was in the beginning of the year. Although the Chargers are probably not going to be the team that exposes them. Where are these catching 4 or 5 balls a game? He's going to be an L-Flex for me. Kelsey's in your lineup, obviously. There's really no receivers you want to be putting into your lineup from KC. I will say, if Hollywood Brown's available on your waiver wire and you could throw him into the IR for right now, I would hold on to him and maybe you get something out of him in week 16, week 17. All right, that's really all I could say in that game. Let's go Cincinnati and Dallas. Monday Night Football. Cincinnati, 5.5-point favorites on the road. Nothing you don't know here. 49.5-point total. So they're expecting some fucking points here. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, must starts, of course. On the flip side, Dallas. We'll have to wait on CeeDee Lamb. He re-injured his shoulder that he had the AC sprain on originally. Jerry Jones said he expects him to be fine for week 14. If that's the case, CeeDee Lamb gets a shitload of targets. He's going to be in the strong start category for me. And honestly, with the matchup against Cincinnati's abysmal secondary, he probably shoots right up into the must-start category. I don't think there's a world where you could sit CeeDee Lamb at this point, especially with 6 teams on bye. Behind him, Brandon Cooks is a little bit interesting here. He scored a touchdown his first week back last week. He'll get healthier. He'll get more snaps. This is an offense where, the other playmakers are not really making plays out here. So I think Cooks is going to be thrown into the L flex category. You could do worse, but not much worse. All right. I think Cooks is someone that I want to pick up and stash and kind of see what happens over the next couple weeks for this Dallas offense, who is, they're not really shy about throwing the ball right now. They're getting down. They're letting Cooper Rush kind of rip it, and he's progressing, and he's getting better week by week by week and putting up, decent statistics, I will say. All right. So we will wrap it up there. That is the Week 14 wide receiver preview for fantasy football. Again, if you want to support the brand, the best way to do so and to support yourself is by downloading the Underdog Fantasy app. You will get that free square for tonight's game. Jordan Love, half a passing yard if you download it with code BDGE and deposit $10 or more. Deposit bonus, free square, everything free. All right. I love y'all. I'm out. Smoochies.